So if the SPL was established in 1938, when did the ACO come into existence?
It was established in 1940, shortly after the SPL was organized.
Why?
First, in part, it was because management within the SPL feared discovery by Congress. So they decided to construct Black Root, which was the code name of the ACO, in order to build a laboratory that was untouchable by political forces or the media. Second, they didn't want the research agenda of the SPL competing with ETSUs. When all of this first occurred, ETs and UFOs were still a subject of great debate within the SPL. Most of the SPL leaders didn't believe in them. There was no hard evidence. But when the first spacecraft was found intact, it changed the minds of everyone within the SPL, and it was decided that a separate research agenda needed to be developed, and that it was the more urgent and secretive of the two labs. So, Black Root, or the ACO as it became known later, was established behind the SPL at a deeper level of secrecy. It was unacknowledged 2 levels deep.
Were you referring to the Roswell incident just then? About the recovered spacecraft?
No. This was an abandoned spacecraft found in waters off the coast of Florida in 1940.
It was just abandoned? Who found it?
As the story goes, a recreational diver found it in waters about 60 feet deep. It was perfectly preserved.
Whatever happened to the diver?
It was an anonymous tip given to the Navy. The person who discovered it was never found. However, we later learned that the discovery was a staged event.
A staged event?
Meaning that the discovery was orchestrated by the core team.
So this was a core team spacecraft left behind to be discovered by the Navy?
It's how they chose to make first contact.
By leaving behind one of their spacecraft in the ocean, and then calling our Navy and telling them where to find it? Shit, this is strange.
Yes, but it took 3 calls to get someone to investigate according to the log entries.
Okay, so this is how the ACO came about. When did you get involved?
In 1956, my father discovered a damaged spacecraft in the jungles of Bolivia during a hunting trip. It was a triangular vessel about 70 meters from end to end, nearly equilateral. It included 26 crew. All dead.
Core team?
No, this craft was later confirmed as a Zeta ship. It was on a scouting mission similar to my father hunting for animals. Unfortunately, it malfunctioned in flight during an electrical storm. My father was an electronics dealer, mostly for the Bolivian military.
I know you told me this story before, but please repeat yourself for the sake of the record.
My father recovered a specific technology from the ship, and then contacted a military official within the Bolivian government that was a trusted friend. Initially, my father was interested in selling the craft to the Bolivian military, but it quickly became a concern of the US military, specifically the SPL. A director from the SPL met with my father, ascertained the ship's location, and performed a complete salvage operation in the span of 3 days. This was done in exchange for US citizenship and a role within the SPL for my father.
Why did your father negotiate for this instead of money?
He knew it was the only way to preserve my life and his. He retained control of a navigational technology that was aboard the ship, and turned everything else over to the SPL.
And what about the Bolivian government?
They were handsomely paid.
That's it?
In the 7 years between 1952 and 1959, 6 additional spacecraft were found under similar circumstances as in the case of my father. Only one of these was found in US territory. The other 5 were willingly handed over to our military in exchange for money.
I take it these countries didn't want to deal with the political implications?
That, but they also wanted the money and a friendly alignment with the US military. They saw future benefits in the form of shared technologies, military protection, loans, and many other intangible benefits. In short, it was smart politics. Besides, no other country, outside of the Soviet Union, had any laboratories like the ACO. What would they do with these spacecrafts?
Your father and you end up in the United States. What qualified him for admission into the SPL and what did he do there?
My father was not simply a salesman to the Bolivian government. He was an electronics expert with the equivalent of an advanced electrical engineering degree. He had several patents to his credit, but was considered something of a dreamer and a lost soul, I suppose.
Is he still alive?
No.
I'm sorry. What about the rest of your family? Was it just you and your father that came to America?
I was an only child. My mother died shortly after I was born. I was only 4 years old when we came to the States. I really don't have strong memories of my home in Sorata.
Where's Sorata?
North of La Paz, on the east end of Lake Titicaca.
Maybe I've watched too many episodes of The X-Files, but it seems a little hard to believe that your father could negotiate a job and US citizenship with the SPL. Can you explain how he did that?
He asked. It wasn't such a hard thing. Here's a man that speaks perfect English, knows electronics, and has some political clout. More importantly, he led the SPL to a very important discovery, worth billions of dollars in research and development. And, my father was smart enough to photograph the craft and secure electronic components that pertained to navigation. He had these carefully secured with instructions for their distribution should anything befall him or me.
Don't take this the wrong way, but didn't you say that only young geniuses were hired into the ACO? I assume your father didn't qualify.
No. He wasn't a genius. But he was smart enough to add value to some of the reverse engineering experiments that were ongoing within the ACO, especially those that pertained to semiconductors.
And all this was happening in the mid-50s?
Yes.
Was 15 there at the time?
No. He joined the ACO in the spring of 1958.
So he knew your father?
My father, believe it or not, became a high-level director of the ACO toward the latter part of his tenure, thanks largely to 15. Who took an immediate liking to my father. Remember 15 is Spanish. My father knew 15 as well as anyone, and had the utmost respect for him.
Was your father part of the Labyrinth group?
Yes.
When did you find out about the Labyrinth group and its mission?
15 introduced me to it in a meeting I'll never forget.
What time was this?
September 18, 1989.
What happened?
15 showed me a suite of technologies that had been part of a TTP with the core team. He explained it activated parts of the brain that fused the unconscious data stream with the conscious. It enabled a much more potent flow of data to be captured by the conscious mind.
Can you explain how it works?
I'll do my best, but it's a technical explanation. I don't know any other way to do it.
Try. I'll signal when I'm lost.
There's a part of the brain known as thalamocortical system. The core team technology activated this specific section of the brain, inducing a small functional cluster within this system to expand a higher-order consciousness. These are the neural coordinates of consciousness, pertaining to higher-order reasoning, which is very useful to scientific inquiry, mathematics, and general problem-solving. Yes?
I'm not totally lost. But what's the role of this technology to the Labyrinth group?
When 15 first became acquainted with the core team TTP, he was the first to use this technology on his own brain.
Yes, I remember now. He got the vision of BST shortly afterwards. Right?
Correct.
And this was why he established the Labyrinth group, to pursue the development of BST. Right?
Yes.
So, everyone who was handpicked by 15 got to use this core TM technology, and everyone got smarter as a result. And no one outside the Labyrinth group suspected that the Labyrinth group existed?
No one to my knowledge.
Okay, back to your story with 15. What happened?
Everyone who knew anything about 15 knew he was intensely interested in time travel, but I had no idea as to the degree of his intensity until that day. He explained the physics behind his BST plan and how the core team played a vital role in its development. He wanted to reassign me to a new project that was related to BST development, and when he explained the nature of the project, I shook my head in disbelief that he felt I could do the job.
What was it?
It was a project that involved designing and developing an advanced neuronal selection technology for the human brain, a subject that I knew very little about. I raised this objection, but 15 explained that no one else did either, so it was just as well that I undertook the research. And then he casually explained the core team technology for brain enhancement. This was when he told me how all personnel with the security clearance of 12 were invited to undergo the process.
I assume everyone accepted the invitation.
It's a safe assumption, although there are some drawbacks to the technology.
Like?
The information capacity of the conscious mind is very limited. When you intensify the connection between the conscious and unconscious, The conscious mind rejects the data stream's breadth of information and tends to become observational of the alternative states of consciousness. In other words, the brain enhancement process triggers a rapid and fluid shifting between states of consciousness, not unlike a slideshow in fast motion with each slide representing a different state of consciousness.
I think I follow you. But isn't it worth it if you can control this side effect?
I thought so, as did everyone else. There were some that were more affected by this than others, and typically it only lasted for a few weeks until the higher mind began to integrate this into its dynamic core.
Okay, enough about the brain. I'd like to return to the topic of the Labyrinth group. You mentioned in the first interview that this is the most secret of all the organizations on the planet, even though it's one of the most influential. How does it operate in secrecy and yet exert its influence?
The Labyrinth group is a subset of the ACO that's absolutely secret. Its main purpose was to create a staging organization for the pure state technologies that were part of the TTPs that 15 negotiated with the Zitas and Cortium. 15 didn't want these technologies within the ACO where they were within striking distance of the SPL and potentially the NSA. He wanted to be able to review, analyze, and synthesize these new technologies before he figured out how to dilute them into less powerful technologies that could be exported to the SPL or the private syndicates we worked with. We used the best security technologies in existence. By that, I mean that we could secure our technologies from any hostile force. This enabled the Labyrinth group personnel to focus on applications of these pure state technologies for the advancement of our BST agenda. Our influence is not understood by anyone because we've managed to release these diluted technologies into behind-the-scenes technologies that are used by our military, the NSA, DARPA, and private syndicates of our own choosing.
I thought you said you even work with private industry?
The Labyrinth group doesn't work directly with the private sector. But some of our technologies filter into the private sector.
Like the transistor?
No. Actually the field effect transistor was more the development of the SPL.
Then give me an example of something more recent that involved the Labyrinth group and the private sector. Something I might be aware of.
I can't think of anything that would be known to you at this time. Our technologies don't appear on the cover of Newsweek or Time.
I just want to get some information that I can validate later. The transistor story, well, interesting. Doesn't give me anything I can follow up on. I doubt Shockey's still alive. Is he?
First of all, if he were alive, he'd never divulge the influence of the SPL in his research. Second, he died about 8 years ago.
So what can you share with me that corroborates even to a tiny degree that the Labyrinth group might exist?
Nothing. There's nothing you could do to trace things back to the Labyrinth group. I can't stress it enough. Our ways of filtering technologies into the private sector are extremely subtle.
Okay, then. Just give me an example.
The Labyrinth group developed a computer system, which we call ZEMI. Part of the unique characteristics of ZEMI is that its information structure is based on a new form of mathematics for information storage, recombinant encryption, and data compression. It was a mathematics that provided quantum improvements in each of these areas. And we shared it with scientists involved in the design of the MiG-29.
Russia? Are you saying the Labyrinth group works with the Russian government?
No, we never worked with governments directly. In this case, we worked with the Phasotron Research and Production Company in Moscow. We supplied them with an assortment of algorithms, which they in turn adapted for use within their information and fire control radar systems aboard the MiG-29. These same algorithms were discovered by American interests and are now being adapted for use in broadband delivery systems for the global market.
Who's the American interest? Can you give me names?
It's not a well-known company, but they go under the name of Omnigon, based in San Diego.
And Omnigon has this technology, which was originally developed by the Labyrinth group for computer storage, and now they're using it to build broadband delivery systems. In layperson's terms, can you tell me what these networks will do?
Assuming they use this technology appropriately, it'll enable Omnigon to embed a significant amount of functionality in the switches of the ATM network and not rely on server-side solutions, which will increase the speed and custom functionality of a network.
By my definition, That wasn't in layperson terms. But it doesn't matter. Did the Labyrinth group create this technology or reverse engineer it from ET sources?
A little of both, actually. They were created within the Labyrinth group, but some of the initial thinking came from the Zitters, which was reverse engineered from one of their spacecraft.
How did the organization in Russia get this technology from the Labyrinth group?
15 knew one of the senior scientists at Phasatron and presented him with the idea. It was a friendly gesture, which he believed would later be useful in recruiting this scientist. This method of sharing creates loyalty, and it can be done in such a skillful way that the recipient of the idea can believe it was their idea and not simply given to them.
But you must track these technologies, or how else would you know it ended up in Omnigon's hands?
We have operatives from the intelligence community who feed us information. They're essentially moles that live within the major government research labs and the military-industrial complex. In this case, one of our operatives at General Dynamics brought this to our attention. We even use our remote viewing technology to track some of our more advanced technologies that we've placed within major syndicates.
Maybe we should leave off there. I know you'd prefer to keep these sessions brief, although I'm very tempted to plunge into this topic of syndicates. Is there anything you'd like to add before we call it a night?
No, not really. I think we covered a lot of information tonight about my personal philosophy. And for what it's worth, I'd like to remind you that it was my philosophy. I'm not trying to press it on anyone. And I'm certainly not trying to preach a particular message or lifestyle. I would hope that in our next session, with your help, we could concentrate on the Wingmakers and perhaps minimize my personal views on cosmology and the like.
I'll try, but I can't make any promises. I had a complete list of questions to ask you tonight about the Wingmakers. But somewhere along the way I thought it would be interesting to better understand how you think. I'll try my best tomorrow night to keep on the subject of the Wingmakers. Do you have any suggestions?
I think the artifacts are extremely interesting, so I'd recommend that we focus on that topic.
I'll do my best. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Sarah. Thank you as well.
End of session 3.